Political analysis. Let me just read one line from it. The political brinksmanship of recent months highlights what we see as America's governance and policy making becoming less stable, less effective, and less predictable than we previously believed. The statutory debt ceiling and the threat of default have become political bargaining chips in the debate over fiscal policy. This is from your report on your website. To an extent,
doesn't sound so half-baked to me.
Well, I'll tell you this, I wonder if 10 years ago or at the height of the bubble, if you had known what was really going on, would you have downgraded our credit rating?
Well, you're certainly correct to say that 10 years ago we had a pro-cyclical fiscal policy, and that it would have been much wiser then when we were at the peak of our demographic profile to have piled away more savings than we did, more fiscal savings. But at that point, most of the metrics of the United States were in much better shape, either fiscally or externally. So now what's changed? Well, we did have this deep recession, and quite appropriately, the administration let the automatic fiscal stabilizers operate. But as a result of that, and with the contraction in the economy, you had your level of debt really double in size. It went from about 37% of GDP, now it's, if you take all levels of government together, up to about 75% of GDP.
And that's two things happening, right? Spending explodes, but also revenue to the government.
Yeah, and a lot of that spending you want to have happen, like unemployment insurance, for example, things like that.
Stimulative, right.
But things that automatically happen. And on top of that, you had a fiscal stimulus package. But really, that was not the major contribution to the decline in your position. All right, so we didn't save during the good years. We had some bad years. We appropriately tried to smooth out the economic cycle. But now we're in a position, and we still have some room to maneuver in the short term, right? But in the medium term and in the long term, because we have used the ammunition that we had, it's now is the time to reassure markets by putting forward a medium-term fiscal consolidation plan that will be credible.
Right. Governor Rendell.
Yeah, Mr. Chambers, I'm not sure all of this blame, that's what we do in politics, we blame people. But I'm more interested in something that came out in the first segment of the show. 5 countries have gotten downgraded and have bounced back. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, hypothetically, that between now and Thanksgiving, everyone gets their act together. We put reasonable revenue increases on the table, significant entitled reform on the table, and we cut another $3.5 trillion out of the debt. We also put significant investments in things that are necessary for our growth. We do all those things. Is it possible that as soon as 3 or 4 months from now, if S&P saw that action taken by the President and the Congress, that we could be upgraded?
Well, the way you pose the question is in a manner that is not a particularly realistic scenario.
Well, so, we like to dream here.
Yeah, right.
We like to dream.
We're aspirational.
We're aspirational. But what if that happened?
But let's talk
because I think there may be congressmen listening to us right now.
Okay, well, let me talk about a couple of things, and then we can go from there. First of all, we assume that the Joint Select Committee will deliver the goods, the $1.5 trillion in savings. And if they don't, that the sequestration mechanism will come into play.
Meaning the automatic cuts.
Right. So now what we're really talking about is what kind of additional measures are going to be on the table. Now, the program that we have now is pretty much backloaded over the 10-year period. Now that we're in the situation that we're in, that we're down at AA+, we're going to be looking for the actual goods to be delivered. The 5 countries that lost their AAA rating, that got it back, those are Australia, Canada, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. They got it back over a period of 9 to 18 years. Now, how did they do that? All of them undertook significant fiscal reform that markedly reduced their level of debt to GDP. So we're talking about reducing the level of debt to GDP. And all of them, except for Australia, undertook additional economic reforms that got their external position back into balance. The United States runs a structural current account deficit. That's a matter we can get into later if you want. But I guess the gist of it is there were both fiscal measures and economic measures that were enacted. It took time for those to show their fruit, and as at the end of that...
Let me interrupt for 1 second. The thrust of or a good part of your report was the political failings in the system. But if we corrected those, let's assume hypothetically we all got together and did the right thing and corrected those political failings, wouldn't that justify a relook?
If you corrected the political settings, that would certainly improve the credit standing of the United States. But let's not forget the damage that has been done to the credibility outside the United States about this debacle over raising the debt ceiling. It is unimaginable for your highest rated government to be in a situation where they were 10 hours away from having a major cash flow problem. I mean, this simply does not exist with other governments. There's only a handful of governments in the world that separate the budget process from the debt approval process. You know, we have a budget, on which for this current fiscal year that has been voted, bipartisanly, and then to have a subsequent discussion over, paying the bills that have been racked up. This doesn't happen elsewhere.
Mr. Chambers, you've been criticized by the Treasury Secretary and officials there for a $2 trillion mistake.
Right.
Saying that you didn't account for $2 trillion or more.
And for not having credibility, for missing the major meltdown of our lifetime.
No doubt about it. But on this particular issue, they say you miscalculated by $2 trillion. How do you answer that question?
This is an issue, a technical issue between what sorts of baselines you take. Are you going to take a baseline that assumes that existing law remains in place, which means the lapsing of the 2001-2003 tax cuts, that the AMT is applied to people who make $80,000 a year or more, that the clawback takes place on the Medicare payments every year, or whether or not you relax those assumptions, and which scoring done by the CBO would be most consistent. It doesn't change the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground is the control budget, the Budget Control Act of 2011 is going to give you a little over $2 trillion in savings. It doesn't change the facts on the ground that the debt to GDP ratio, which is now about 74%, by the time we get to 2015 will be 81%, and by the time you get to 2021, depending on what assumptions you make about growth and interest rates and whatnot, is going to be well over 85%.
John Chambers, Managing Director at Standard & Poor's. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, are they at risk of being downgraded next?
We're going to have an announcement on that shortly.
Really? That sounds like news.
That he's not going to give you.
Doesn't sound
All right,
good, though.
thank you so much, John.
Doesn't sound good.
Thank you very much.
All right.